ENDEVERS of Sherlock Holmes, The Tired Captain, is copyright 2016 by its author Sandor Jay Sonnen. All rights reserved. ENDEVERS of Sherlock Holmes. 5. The Adventure of the Tired Captain by Sandor Jay Sonnen. There was, owing to the nature of how he approached his profession, a feast or famine aspect to the work involving the talents of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, as he attempted to take on only those cases that served to challenge his deductive and intellectual abilities, or which had in their presentation some form of quirk, not typical of the many aspects of human interaction. On most occasions wherein he would be presented with a commonplace matter, his response gave to the applicant a reaction of indifference, if not downright disdain, and in such circumstances these persons were returned a telegram stating his disinterest, or, should their plea be brought to him in person, they were kindly shown the door. Occasionally, and the reader will have noticed this has been the case from time to time, Holmes would refer such would-be clients to a matter in which he was currently engaged, stretching it into a far more important event, allowing the visitor to save face before leaving. He would give to them a white lie that his work at the time made it impossible for him to turn to their problem, and they could retreat with most of their dignity. At times, however, his prevarication was so outrageous that I would nearly blush as he uttered its pronouncement. He would have nothing before him but his own time, and finding no interest in an appeal made to him, he would announce to the suitor he could not possibly act at in the instant matter presented by them, because he was already engaged in the strange doings at the House of Silk or some other invented byplay. Governed by his sole interest in only those cases where there was the amazing occurrence of a given event, or those cases of an unusual situation in which a client found himself, Holmes often had to accept famine. The summer of 1887, however, was an amazing period of one dramatic case nearly touching another, such that there was during these months only a matter of a few days separating the conclusion of one event from the commencement of a new adventure. July of this year was especially filled with many calls upon my friend. I had to revisit my notes several times before ensuring I was presenting to the public a train of his work that reflected some accuracy in their actual dates. Looking over what I have previously set before the public, I believe I tacitly promised to give an account of the strange event experienced by Captain Drew Somrack, presenting to Holmes an intriguing combination of the weird, frightful, and originally lurid for him to explore. If it were not for the intervention of Holmes and his ability to reason out what was unique and imaginative, Captain Somrack would have had his career destroyed. Of that there can be no argument. But there was another portion of the Somrack investigation that went farther than merely protecting the man's professional reputation and saving him from ruin. It was in the heart of the month that I had received a message brought to my home by one of the page boys I had recognized as occasionally running errands for Holmes, and he waited for me to scribble out an affirmative reply to my friend that I would see him as soon as was practical, the earlier the better, and for me to bring within my general medical kit my lancet. I arrived at my old lodgings at Baker Street early that afternoon, where Holmes handed me a brief letter he had received early this morning. The letter read, "Mr. Holmes, I have your name from a young man of my acquaintance from only one voyage, but a man who I immediately understood to be worthy of trust and competence. This was Victor Trevor, who was passenger on a ship of old where I served as mate. I met Trevor as he travelled from Southampton to East India, where I believe he disembarked in Bengal to work at a tea plantation. If ever there was a man in a right fix, it would be me. I have suffered the most unfortunate setback, and genuine harm would befall me should certain claims be shown to have occurred under my supervision. In short, I am in need of your defence of an incident that is not clear to me, and one that I barely recall. If I was alert during the event, I am in for the label of a full-on incompetent. If I was asleep at the time, I am a miserable fool. Due to an incident from yesternight, where I am accused of sleep, perhaps induced by drink, I am arrested and held by the merchant authorities. I am allowed your visitation at the Naval Holding Stockade on Lambeth Road in Southwark at the river's edge. My little money allows me either a legal defence or an inquiry. One, but not both. The authority here has stated to me I am able to use any materials or notes of interviews made by their investigators, as these will be shared with me, but that I am also allowed to mount a defence of my own making. Please send word to me in some way that I might expect you. Drew Somrack, Captain, Merchant Navy. Do you have any knowledge of the plight of this man? I asked Holmes. None whatsoever. And I am here to join you in meeting with Captain Somrack. Yes. I sent him a confirmation nearly as soon as I received his letter. It is unusual he should choose to spend the little he has on my services instead of a solicitor. Well, he trusted your friend from college then. Then you remember young Victor Trevor? Only from your account of him. This was one of the men who crewed the ship Trevor used to get to India, where he began his tea plantation. So says Captain Somrack. Holmes stood and led me out the door and downstairs to hail a cab. Somrack was taken into custody last night from an incident we will presume is no more than 12 hours fresh. I would want you to get a sample of his blood as soon as we arrive. Yes, I replied. That would be wise. Time is always a factor in such charges where drunkenness is thought to be at the heart of the matter. The detention rooms were built into the block of stone that served many purposes for the Royal Navy's administration at Southwark. We were given escort and shown to the hold of where Captain Somrack had spent the night. It was not technically a jail cell, and the level of security supervising the man appeared to be lax. It was spacious. With one man inside of this room, it appeared he had to himself. Our escort left us at the threshold of the open door to the hold. As I could see cards scattered about and in two piles, I presumed the guard to also be Captain Somrack's game partner, as well as his jailer. The organisation of what I saw led me to presume the honour system was in play, and that Somrack's supervision was as much on his own trust as it was the Navy's enforcement. The game in play was atop a wood table, which evidently served as the place where the prisoner ate his meals, wrote his correspondence should he choose to do so, or sat upright to read. There was also a cot and bedding, a sink, and presumably behind a discreet L-shaped wall, a private necessity. A standing piece of furniture with 3 shelves held some books for light entertainment, and these were probably donated by fellow sailors or a support organisation. But there was also a Bible, some histories featuring the Navy, and some magazines. Its occupant was a sandy-bearded, stout fellow of solid weight and just under 6 feet. He rose from the end of his cot as we entered. His face was lined and marked, and its ruddy original hard pink had become tanned over years, so that at places there was a definite brown to the mix of his pallor. The sandy colour of the hair upon his head was somewhat lighter than that of the beard, and his eyes were a gentle medium blue of no particular kindness, but neither were they hard or menacing. His ears were boxed and close to the sides of his face. The beard held fast to his cheeks and chin, as it was trimmed very close to the areas surrounding his mouth. He wore no moustache. Drew Somrack was a well-rounded man at the shoulders, and made one believe he had done something in his youth to hone a built-up body. His legs matched the shoulders. "I am Sherlock Holmes," my friend offered to the man in a dishevelled, worn white shirt and dark blue uniform a genial greeting. "My friend, Dr. John Watson, a retired army surgeon and veteran of our recent campaign in Afghanistan some few years ago." "I am thankful to have received your response and grateful you are here, Mr. Holmes. I understand you remember one of my friends who you delivered to his new home in Bengal." Holmes addressed the man. "Yes, that is so. I remember Mr. Trevor, certainly. He had with him a vast shipment of special botanicals, as we called them. He believed his various plants he had with him would be able to improve his living conditions there. We had stopped at the southern coast of the Good Hope Cape, and then at Madagascar, and then we were across for the Indian Ocean. He had set aside from the origin of our sailing spaces for these trees and botanicals and a great amount of seed plants. It was unusual because no white man ever did such a thing. You've got everything you'd ever want there on the Indian continent, but he had his ways. filled up his area just as soon as we sailed by stopping along the Portuguese coast. Then a touch more from Western Africa, then, as I just told you, more from the African south, and it all fit just as you please. Well, that is, we made it fit, and dropped he was in East India, with a colony already planted there for a good 30-40 years before he arrived. I suspect he's made himself a packet by now, if he hadn't gone back. I would have heard from him if he had, said Holmes. Well, we both know that's not surprising. Almost impossible to go back. Climate, weather, cheap labour, good companionship. Every man there with a house as big as a seaside pavilion. Hard to match the same living here. It's our cold and ice snows you don't miss when you live in the tropics. Holmes looked about the room. The Navy appears to show you a kindness. I must be honest in that I am treated well. My captors know I will not bolt, and I am given permission to move about this entire section with no one having a care, and they're letting me do so. But in truth, I've only been here since last night, and I've stayed all of my time in this hold. I've been quiet as a lamb. I am going to draw your blood, Captain Somrack, I said. Please take off your jacket and roll up your sleeve. When did you last eat? Have you had your breakfast? I had no dinner last night, Doctor, he responded. But I arrived here late and in no condition for eating. I was groggy and in and out of sleep at all times during my transport from Margate to this place. At first the naval men tried to get something out of me, but failing that, due to my exhaustion, they put me in the brig on the ship, impounded my own, and in line we steamed away. That was just after midnight. At 1 or so they asked me again what I remembered about the incident at Margate, and again I was useless to them and wanted sleep. They told me my constant want of sleep was making it bad for me. I had no defence or desire for discussion. I collapsed on this cot, and that is all I can remember from last night. Here I awoke this morning, at around what my jailer told me was 8 o'clock. I was given a small breakfast and coffee, and an official statement was taken by one of the mid-level officers, with a junior one by his side. Afterward, I was permitted my right to contact someone, and it was then I wrote to you, Mr. Holmes. And how did you find yourself here? By that I mean, what do you remember from last night? Did you drink on duty, Captain Somrack? Asked Sherlock Holmes. How indeed, replied Somrack, nodding at me as he unravelled his shirt sleeve, while I put away my instruments and carefully capped the small amount of blood I knew Holmes would want for analysis. Somrack stood, gave up his seat to Holmes, and sat himself upright on the cot. I remained in mine and replaced the blood sample I had in my hand for my notebook. I am Captain Drew Somrack of the Royal Navy's Merchant Service. I have held my current rank for 6 years now, and during my career I have had 2 awards for service. I have never in my career taken strong drink while on duty, nor the hours before taking the helm of any ship. I am to have fallen asleep at the wheelhouse while the Berwick grounded at Margate, not at all far from where they're all building that new clock tower for Her Majesty. Did you fall asleep? Asked Holmes. Somrack became still. His entire expression changed, and he looked for a moment at me rather than at Holmes. Then he looked between us and far off, as though he were leaving the room and us behind. Mr. Holmes, he turned back to my friend. You may be asking yourself why I asked you to come down and not anyone else. I mean, not asking for representation by a solicitor, or one of the naval law experts, or even a retired man who has a good rep and was behind the wheel 35 years. Those very questions did cross my mind. Yes, Captain Somrack. I did something I hadn't ever done in a lifetime of shipping. I can't believe myself or anything about it. I think I may have blacked out, the man said slowly. But even still, in my blacking out, I remember violently jolting up, severely, hard-like. Then I may have gone out again. Then I may have bolted upright after that. It was strange, like I had left the ground and was floating somewhere. Floating, as in the air, and not the sea, you mean? Asked Holmes. That's exactly what I mean, sir. Floating in the air. You were floating, then blacking out, and then jolting upright. Holmes restated his understanding of the man's reflection of his time at the wheel. Yes, Mr. Holmes, but all of it in such a twilight sort of way. None of it, not even the jolt, can I remember as an actual event, similar to how the 3 of us are having our conversation. There was an unreal quality to all of it. This is a hard thing to express. I simply don't remember any of it as something I can revisit. Vague moments and my head floating, then being brought back to earth by this jolting I keep telling you about. Holmes sat upright in his chair. I looked at the man in puzzlement. You don't remember it as an actual event, but you must know you were on the ship. Holmes verified. There is something to the matter of where I would have been while on the ship, that is so, said Captain Somrack. For I have some memories of this, but... And the man once more looked away for a while. But, said Holmes, there is something more. Somrack looked at the floor, then up at Holmes. Yes, Mr. Holmes, there is something more. Holmes and I looked at one another, then at our client. Mr. Holmes, I had to be on board the ship because that's from where I was taken by the naval people, when they came on board and found me in the wheelhouse, unconscious. But I also knew I was on board because while I was in my dream state, I remember sighting several of the landmarks I had always seen on the voyage. Of that there cannot be any doubt. I remember them. This means I was at my post. But I could not have been at my post because I remember the lady. I stopped my writing. I looked up at Somrack. Sherlock Holmes had on his face interest and surprise. The lady? I asked for the both of us. Captain Somrack did not answer this. Holmes changed his questioning. Can you guess, Captain Somrack, what might have been your manifest? Nothing different than usual, Mr. Holmes. Paris, Rouen and Rennes. Those are the staple customers for using my steamer. I'm fast and reliable, and I go right to London through the East Gate. Through Margate, I mean. I take my cargo right to the Isle of Dogs, right to London. The next day I sail back, and am ready to go again from the French coast at evening sail, unless I'm off and it's Captain Joseph or Captain Barrett. We handle many specialised accounts, the kind where you get to know your clients backward and forward. We know faces, and they know and rely on us. We promise next day cargo service, and we are very reliable. One of our accounts is for a French company that makes fancy fixtures for this Edison business that is becoming the excitement in all of London. Quite a lot of the businesses changing to electrics are impressed by the company producing the service, but not impressed by the fixtures themselves. A company in Paris uses our ship to send to England the more stylised pieces for home and office use. I have seen them and would understand why the more affluent would want them, and not our English wood boxes that serve in this way. We handle some medical accounts and bring certain products, again of the specialised nature, needed in the London area immediately. We leave later than any other boat, and we are in London by morning. Then, of course, there are some who simply come to the dock at Le Havre and ask about for which ship is leaving and when, and if they have a man at the other end near Isle of Dog, can we fix them up, and of course we can. And if our agent is busy or elsewhere, I can add anything reasonable to the manifest, and together the shipper and I can muscle on board his lot. So then, Captain, let us begin this voyage of yours which began last night, said Holmes. Mr. Holmes, the way you helped this young man Trevor, as he told me his tale that featured you on our long voyage to India, is the kind of help I would be needing. You can work out my problem, because it's too strange to bring before a judge, even with the finest legal man money can buy. Money I don't have, Mr. Holmes. I have something to pay for you, but it isn't much. Do not worry about that too much, Captain Somrack. In fact, your problem is of great interest to me. I may need some costs that would have to be defrayed, and should that be the case, I will let you know about that as best I can. But you need not worry about my professional rate. I may be paid from the work itself. Captain Somrack began his narrative, and there was to it a sorrow. My mate had not shown, and that of itself was extraordinary, Mr. Holmes, for although I can make the crossing in good time by myself, both manning the wheel and stoking the furnace does change the night's work. I say his absence was strange because he is reliable, and for 3 years has only missed a casting off twice. So it was last night that I left by myself, along with the boxes of cargo that manifested onto the ship, and one passenger that was on board when the lines were taken in. This passenger. How did he appear, and did he have a cargo? Yes, Mr. Holmes, if memory serves, which it does for all things that happened before the voyage began, he had some small box of crated wood, nailed down, and a sack of some kind. He also carried some personal effects. Holmes thought about this. Then he said, "Let us give our attention to the crossing itself." We were underway, and soon steam and sail were doing their usual best. and I was a bit of a busy worker alone, and making it all work at wheel and furnace. My one passenger did help me with deploying the sail, a straightforward concept, so there was no worry over any lack of seamanship on his part. But then, half an hour into the crossing, for the first time in my career, where the crossing had always been perfect, and my body fully prepared for it, and my mind on the job, and my hands on the wheel, I became immeasurably tired. That I most certainly remember. And sleep befell me to a degree I'd never experienced before. This was despite my having coffee in my canteen to hand, and only coffee, Mr. Holmes. Nothing more, which is my style. Then I had to be in my bunk, laying down. But that should not be so, as it would have meant I would have left my station at the house. But there was the lady, right on the wall. I know she was there, so I had to be in my cabin. Then I fell asleep. Then I jolted out of my sleep, and before me was the lighthouse at Saint-Valery-en-Caux. I saw it before me after I was awoke in this hard fashion. But in just a blur, you see. Not in the world of real memory, but in the land of dreams. Holmes took Captain Somrack from his reflection and dragged him back into our world. The lighthouse. I have seen it on the crossing more than once, though nearly all crossings I have made have usually been direct to Calais, or from Calais to return home. I am often in Paris. But on an occasion I have had to travel to Normandy's west coast, and I have seen and remember the structure of the lighthouse at Saint-Valery-en-Caux. You did not stop there and tie at a berth for any cargo added to the manifest. We do not go to that town. And anyway, Saint-Valery has been its own concern since the rise of Fécamp, which we pass before sighting the lighthouse. We do not go to Fécamp either. These are small ports and nothing like Le Havre. If one wishes something of cargo from the north of France, from Paris, say, or any of the great cities in the north, they overland it to my starting point at Le Havre or to Calais. Those are your only real choices. Captain Somrack carefully spoke these words to Holmes. His speech now was focused and straightforward. He had left his thoughts of somewhere beyond. He looked to me. You are a man of medicine, are you not? It is a strange tale I give to you. There is something in all of what I experienced that made me believe it was related to needing a physician. And so I was groggy once again. I thought I might have fallen asleep. And there was this jolting and the Château de Dieppe, right in my face. Right in my face. And I know that landmark to be certain. It's dark and all, but the moon shines brightly upon her sure enough. That is a beautiful home, on the mound of an uplifted lawn of grass. Of course, none of those details are able to be seen at night, but in my dream state I saw the chateau, a lighter black against the sky of a darker black, then the lady of my painting once again. To the both of us he asked, "So where was I? Jolted from my sleep at the wheel or in my cabin?" "What of this painting?" asked Holmes. "You refer to a painting of a lady? Come, Captain Somrack, tell us of this painting of a lady." Moments of places and things and landmarks along the coast. Again and again I revisit them. Again and again I am conscious of them. They hovered over me in my sleep, my exhaustion, my body's collapse, if it was that. I saw in my dream these landmarks, so certainly I was at the wheel. But there she is, again and again. The painting is in my cabin. The painting of a woman. The copy of a famous painting of a woman. She was there. The painting was there in my dreaming, in my sleep. She is Lady Jane. It is a poor copy of what I was told is a famous painting that is as large as the woman who posed for it, and this copy was put inside of the captain's cabin of the Berwick, perhaps by 2 masters before me. It is scratched up a bit and hung improperly, with a bit of an off-centre look, but it is fine enough to keep. Otherwise, the walls of the small room are plain enough, and my Lady Jane was over me when I became jolted in my dream. I asked of Somrack, "Why would you be disturbed because of having a dream over what you do in your real life? Haven't you had dreams where you are featured doing exactly that? Haven't we all?" "Yes, Doctor. Naturally, many a dream of mine features the Channel crossing. So it had to be that you were in your cabin during your dreaming," said I. "You made it to your bunk, otherwise you would not have occasionally seen this painting hanging in your cabin." "Just so. That is the one thing to which my mind takes hold of, the thought of the painting looking down upon me, as it were. She is in a dress of gold with the sky behind her. You shall see her, I suppose. The 50-footer I am master of is out in the dock. Naturally, that will be our most immediate port of call, Captain Somrack. But you must finish your narrative, for although I understand it ends at the shore of Margate, you must give us our climax to this strange event," said my friend in a more considerate tone of voice than was usually his speech. "Boulogne-sur-Mer," said Captain Somrack. "The bell tower," Holmes gave back to him before he could say more. "Certainly so," Somrack responded. "The moment you were jolted awake, and there it was before you." "And the lady of the painting," said Holmes, in awe of the circumstance. "Certainly so." "And Margate?" asked Holmes. "And finally I get to Margate. It is an ugly entrance to our river, but there's no mistaking the lighthouse, equally ugly. But in the distance, by moonlight, and by the reflection of the lighthouse's lamp, I clearly saw the outline of the clock tower they're making for the Queen, behind schedule, as is all." Captain Somrack allowed himself a brief moment of levity. That was the end of the nightmare. We grounded on that beach, and I was in the wheelhouse when I was boarded by the Navy's sailors. There were comments made of my being drunk almost at once, but there was on me no sign of drink, so it was believed I drank my fill in France before leaving and watered myself down afterward. I remember as I was pulled from the house, before me was the pile of wood that has become a common joke among us, that the Victoria clock is running late. Yes, the jest has made it into Punch and other reads. I know it well," said Holmes. "And let us move on to the trouble this has caused you. Is there any chance of this drunkenness accusation? I remember your staunch statement of how you do not drink before or during a crossing. Yet, was there a bottle on board for you, or anyone to imbibe?" "Never. I keep no such bottle, and that is a rule. It is a constant of my conduct. When my fatigue fell upon me, and what I recall of my tiredness, this was immediate and unexpected. But as Dr. Watson has pointed out, Captain Somrack, because you have had perhaps hundreds of crossings of this kind, why should your dream not be a dream that reflects your continuous crossings? But," he paused a moment, "but, Mr. Holmes, the landmarks were in order." Holmes reflected. "That is uniquely singular. As in any dream, the landmarks should have been a twisted compilation of many crossings, a jumble mess of fragments with the absurd added into the mix and not per se linear. But the facts, how does this dream bear upon them? What will you say to your naval inquisitors, that you were incompetent, but at least your mind is well in order when you are unconscious? Do not jibe at me." He looked to my friend. "I do not, sir. I, in fact, am your assistant in this matter, for I will definitely take your side and will work out for you what I can. But what are the relevant gains and losses? How is one benefited by this mess of which you have unwillingly played a role? The meat of the matter. There had to be something. Otherwise, the fantastic would rest upon nothing but the storytelling of a child's bedtime. Which is why I called for you, Mr. Holmes. This is more of a puzzle to be solved than a defence to be tried on before a naval inquiry court. Yes, now this is all beginning to make sense to me, inasmuch as your reason for asking for my particular brand of assistance. Now I must ask you about this mate of yours," said Holmes. "My first mate, Jean-Paul, who goes by J.P. "He went missing?" asked Holmes. "He did just that," replied Captain Somrack. "And you have had no word from him or from anyone speaking for him?" "None at all, sir." "And your passenger?" "He is given a billet here as well, or so it has been reported to me." "Won't the Navy choose to discharge him, presuming his witness account has been taken from him?" I asked Captain Somrack. "Again, Dr. Watson, this is one more thing I cannot understand. My naval guards will not share their views on this with me, and I have the notion that, like me, they cannot understand his motivation for wanting to stay here." "That is suggestive," exclaimed Holmes. "Have you had any word of this man or his disposition?" "None at all," replied Captain Somrack. "Then, Captain Somrack, we shall act in your stead, and after we tour your vessel, we shall see about this passenger of yours. Strange there is no word of your mate," concluded Holmes, rising. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I can ask for nothing better than your promise to see what the Navy will share with you. Captain Somrack also stood. I followed suit. "I shall look to the analysis of your blood, Captain," I said to our client. "Naturally you must, Doctor, and you will find there nothing that was, to my knowledge, a trace of liquor." "Yes, Captain. We are all in favour of such a report from the chemist." Holmes and I walked out of the brig, and we went back to the entrance of the facility, and there was at the main desk a naval officer. "Mr. Holmes, I am Lieutenant Richards. I know who you are, sir, and you are most welcome here, and will have our full cooperation. We will share with you everything as it develops before us, or as it has developed, which would perhaps be more accurate. Our policy is to give any sailor or officer in his service complete access to the product of our labours. We understand any person in the circumstances Captain Somrack is most often unable to make any formal inquiries, so we do not hide from someone so situated the fruits of our investigation. May the Navy, Mr. Holmes, count on some form of reciprocity along these lines from yourself and from whom I assume to be Dr. Watson." "Most assuredly, Lieutenant Richards. We are naturally partisan, but not in matters of the truth. There we will agree such knowledge is in the best interest of all concerned. Exactly as I would have hoped to hear you state it, Mr. Holmes. I am sorry to interrupt, Lieutenant, but I have a specimen that cannot wait. I either need to leave or have someone on site run an errand to a chemist for me." "Oh, I see, Doctor. A blood sample?" "Yes," I was frank. "Then, of course, that must go out in immediate course." He rang a bell that sat upon his desk, and soon a man appeared before us. "Sir." "Is Danny about?" "I saw him helping with the chipping of that flatboat, with Keller." "Do you believe he's had his breakfast?" "I should think so, sir. Anything Keller does, he's bound to do." "Quite. Send him in here on the double." "Yes, sir," said the man, who saluted and left. "Danny has more or less attached himself to us. He misses day school at times, and few of us worry over that. He's very bright and cannot wait to enlist. He's 14, so he has some time to go, but he won't leave us, and now he's more than merely our mascot, and is occasionally relied on for some important errands." "He should do you well, Dr. Watson," said Lieutenant Richards. A young man entered wearing a shirt and trousers. He had bright brown hair that was more of a mop and less than navy fashion. "Sir, Danny, have you ever heard of Sherlock Holmes?" The young man was visibly astonished. "Well, who hasn't? Here he is before you, and this is his colleague, Dr. Watson. Yeah, Lieutenant Richards. I'm not a tadpole that I don't know where one is the other is," said the lad. "Hello, Danny," said Holmes. I rose. "I have an important errand for you, Danny. I need this sent to a chemist at an address on St. James Street, and I need you to run there now by means of bus or underground, whatever suits you. And I need you to tell Dr. Callister, who you will find there, that this must be done immediately. And you will wait there in the neighbourhood while he does this for you, and return with the result. I do not need the sample back to me. It is in fact a vial of blood I'm sending you off with. But I need to know its contents. I am looking for any foreign agent in the blood itself," I concluded, handing the young man the vial I had placed in a small package. I also handed him a half-crown, a few shillings, and some sixpence. "Righto," he said. "About how long should this take your blood doctor to do this, then?" "It will depend upon his other matters, but you must impress upon him that it is an urgent matter. I should think you would return in a few hours' time, though I cannot say for certain. You have some money for the process, and for you to have your lunch while Dr. Callister does his work. As soon as you have his results, and he will put this on his professional letterhead, return here at once." "Very understood," said the lad. "May I take my leave now, Lieutenant?" "Off with you, just as Dr. Watson has told you, and take this matter seriously, Danny." The boy bolted away. "May I take you to Captain Somrack's steamer, the Berwick?" "Please do so," said Holmes. "But what is this matter related to Captain Somrack's passenger? Is he here? Is his property here?" "Yes, Mr. Holmes. It was very late when this situation occurred at Margate, and we all made it back here, and because we needed a report from this man, we gave him a billet and left it at that. He has perhaps overstayed his welcome, but he has said he is now prepared to leave us, and only awaits an answer to a telegram he had sent from our communications officer here at our headquarters. That's in another office not far from where we are keeping Captain Somrack. We have fed this man, and he sits in the visitors' waiting area, which is around to the other side of this building and allows for an indoor and outdoor section where people who come to visit their friends or relations serving here, and they are allowed to be for a while. But as I said, the man's getting to be on our nerves. Not that he's done anything to bother anyone, merely his presence. He should have moved on by now. Did he bring with him any property? Did he use the barrack not merely to transport himself, but anything along with him that would require a customs report? No, Mr. Holmes, not at all. He has with him his precious camera and some equipment for its use, and that has been verified, as he has allowed my personnel access to inspect it, though he insisted we do so carefully, and so we did. But other than that, he has no box or crate, if that is what you are asking. Curious he should continue to stay, said Holmes. Yes, agreed Lieutenant Richards. You'd think the man would want to move on and receive his return telegram at his own digs. Might I meet this gentleman? I don't see why not. We were led to the dock, and before us was a 50-footer with a black funnel. Can one man really work this himself? Holmes asked Lieutenant Richards. Well, certainly that is not preferred, but Captain Somrack has done the crossing hundreds of times, and he told our men for their report that he has in the past done it alone when he had to do so. I know these small operations of nightly transport. If you fail once in your promised delivery, for whatever reason, the loss to your company's good name might never rebound. I don't believe the barrack ever carried the overnight mail or anything important of that nature, but I promise you, this business these sailors are in is based on a precise timetable that cannot be upset, or it is their doom, and perhaps the doom of their clients. Lieutenant Richards left us to walk about the steamer. Holmes immediately went below decks, or what there was of it. 2 rooms, the most scant of a galley at one end, and the most undesired privy at the other, fortunately placed furthest from the rest. Of the 2 rooms, these were each nothing more than room for 1 bed and 2 shelves. Quite sparse, these rooms were nearly not meant to be enjoyed. Well, Watson, a man or 2 men could spend their nights in the rooms if need be, and they could live off of foods available to them as well, but for no more than 2 nights. I have seen copies of this painting during my lifetime, I said to Holmes, looking upon the wall of one of the cabins. Yes, Watson, the original hangs in a fine house not far from Oxford. It is owned by Baron Rothschild and is part of his art collection on his estate in Buckinghamshire. It is a smaller copy of one of his massive life-size oil portraits by Joshua Reynolds. I have seen it before. I mean the original. I cannot remember all of the places to where I have travelled, and I do my best to remove their memory as these thoughts interfere with the needs of my work. But I certainly know Reynolds. I am going above, said I. I shall join you, was Holmes's response, and together we walked up to the small wheelhouse aside the furnace. Everything is so compact. I can see how an experienced sailor could work this vessel by himself, I declared. Holmes looked about the wheelhouse, which was either technically or not technically a wheelhouse, in that it was a solid wood framing that did enclose the occupant who would steer the steamer. The structure merely saved the occupant from the sun and wind. Inside of it stood Holmes beside the wheel. He moved his body to verify he could turn and pivot to pick up a shovel and stoke the furnace. Have you seen this canteen of Captain Somrack's? Asked Holmes. I have not, I replied. Look about, won't you? I did so and failed to find it anywhere throughout the deck area. Perhaps it is below, I suggested. No, I have already looked for it there. I have been everywhere below, and it was nowhere to be found, said Holmes. Curious, is it not? That does raise the matter to more than the interesting. Is it conclusive then? I asked him. Well, what it would do, should we be able to find it, is allow us to compare its contents with the lab results. The 2 should match completely. You do not believe they will, said I. I do not believe at this point that we will find the canteen, which is the same as saying the contents of one would in fact match this eventual lab report you will have. And that is most troubling. It means there was more than coffee inside of it. It is our first definite demonstration there has been work on someone's part. Might it have gone overboard? No. You can see to the side of the wheel, where there is this raised section of wood no more than a few inches square, that there has been, over time, the mark of a liquid container made of metal. The circle is unmistakable. And, Watson, there is a neat amount of wood to left and right that would have penned in what was undoubtedly the canteen. It was where Captain Somrack kept it as he stayed at the wheel. With the exception of the Berwick being capsized, the canteen at this location would not have been dislodged. Yes, I see, said I. Holmes left the wheel area and walked about the brief decks. I stood in the centre, followed his movements with my eyes, and took my own look at the Berwick. The steamer had shown use. Chipping and painting over time had grooved the wood to the pattern of a fretsaw puzzle, but the vessel had been taken care of over time. It had been worked and maintained, and there was no rot or section of wood without paint. The funnel could have used paint, but there was no sign the sea air had begun its harmful effect on it. The lines were solid, as were the cleats. The boat showed no damage. Holmes walked the boat along its sides, port and starboard, and finally the aft portion. The lines were tied to the dock, 2 of them. There was a third which hung from the stern, plunging below the waterline. He tugged at all 3 lines, and they were tight. "She is not going anywhere, I should guess," I said to Holmes. "No, indeed not, and that is very good, such is the case," he said to me. He took another look at the port quarter and how the line was firmly tied there to the cleat, and seemed satisfied about something. I followed Holmes to what I understood to be this visitors' waiting area the lieutenant spoke of, where there were 2 weathered tables and some chairs scattered about. A man stood close to the open space, but behind the large glass separation between outdoor and indoor area where he was. He watched as we joined him indoors. "May we sit down and speak with you about last night?" said my friend without introduction. The man looked up at us from his seated position, where he had been staring out at the shipyard surrounding us. He tilted his head one way and then another. Afterward, he found his way to looking at us. He barely registered I was there and gazed at my friend, once more tilting his head. He leaned back. "I know coppers when I see them," said he, looking back out at the yard. "I am happy for you and your talents," said Holmes. "They do not interest me. You may keep them to yourself. I am here to discuss the matter of the grounding of the Berwick at Margate, and where you were positioned at that particular moment. A man's professional career is at stake, and he has asked me to help him solve his problem. When the steamer beached, he says he doesn't remember because he was asleep. Do you remember if you were awake at that moment? What's that matter anyway? There's plenty of captains about these docks and about the Isle, presuming they don't strike. Ha! They're crybabies for their wages to be increased, and on what basis is that? What new lessons have they improved upon in their craft? A boat's a boating, and has been more than 3 generations now of these modern boilers on boats. And what do they want? Another tanner a day? Heh. I say another farthing would do them more than well for themselves and their grubby homes, and what it is they call their children, and the brood witches that help them to sire the little brats." "That is uncalled for," I said to the man. He spent a moment, turning slowly, and he looked at the length of me as if he were sizing me up for a challenge. I was not prepared for his manner, or his attempt at demonstrating he was for me in this fashion. He looked to Holmes. "So, you have a pawn to speak for you, sending him forward while you loft in your position and survey the board." "Your tone is most unhappy," said Holmes. "I am not certain whether I wish to have any conversation with you in the least." "Likewise, my hired helper," he said to Holmes. I took a moment to see the man's position in relation to where we stood. He caught a glimpse of this and once more tilted his head, and then he stated, "You think you're the better of me. Don't. Go off. Be off with your in-vest-ig, gay. Shun. I'm of no difference to it. I see better at what you're about than you can try and ferret out with your snotty noses. What do I care about what you think you can learn from me? There's nothing to learn here. I don't need special talents to see a camera, a mounting tripod, and make a wonder over what you might be keeping it for." Holmes said to the man with a way that implied He understood more than what the man might expect of him. The man looked at his feet and at the battered chocolate-brown square casing that had become the fashionable means for carrying a box camera about, though admittedly the one before us appeared to have seen its day. The tripod had been in its collapsed state, and it was one of those where the legs could unfold outward to allow for several feet of extension. There was another piece to it that appeared to be a telescope of some kind. I wondered over this, the man's use of it, his profession, and his general purpose. Come now, my friend. Why do you choose to skulk about here and not move on to your next port of call? You have too many secrets and only one event of consequence. I am not here to bandy foul phrases with one who is a ragtag. You are servant class if ever there was such. A tool for he who is not only superior to you, but beyond you. The man looked up from his property and seared his eyes into those of my friends. He was not prepared for Holmes's last comment, and Holmes appeared to have struck hard with his observations that meant more to the man than it did to me. Eventually he mastered his reaction and circumstance, but now was on the defence, wanting up to withdraw, but not from fairly winning a round. I am now bored at the two of you, he said. Run off and find your mothers, or if you be needing sanctuary from harm, your younger sisters, I would suppose, who you would seek to stand up for you in your hour of trials. And while you're about it, Mr. Sherlock Holmes of the unofficial and unrenowned, who will sing your praises when you have gone the way of old Stone Man. No fires to light, no tongues to invent, no bones to gnaw upon. You can save yourself the 5 shillings and give yourself an unmarked grave anyway. For who will love you and who will miss you after you are from this world and on to the next? Not your friend here, that is so. He won't wait 3 minutes before wrapping his below-average talents to another whose comical comings and goings will be printable sheets for puppies to be trained to do their business upon. What say you, Sir John? When your master is dead, whose wagon will you tie your tail to for base? Spaniel pats on the head as you beg for scraps. That's enough, fool. It is you who bore. Your entertainment value left you 2 statements ago. Holmes mocked at the man. Holmes looked past the man deeper into the room and saw Lieutenant Richards appear, using the interior door. He stood behind the man who had been Captain Somrack's passenger and signalled we walk through to join with him. We did so, and I took the moment to look at the man who had become, in less than a minute, our adversary, through for reasons I did not comprehend. Why should this man take the attitude he had so immediately chosen to take, and without genuine provocation? Some men are merely just so, I had to remind myself. I wish to include you in on a fresh development related to a telegram that has been relayed to us. Also, Mr. Holmes, Captain Somrack has been taken to St. Thomas's Hospital, which is independent from the Navy, but is in fact at the far north end of our facility here. We wish to have a non-naval opinion of his blood content for our records, and we do this to ensure there is no accusation of prejudice on our part related to the disposition of Captain Somrack. Lieutenant Richards said, opening a door for us. The door was to the room of what served as the communications office for the Navy at Southwark. A junior officer was the sole occupant of the room. He acknowledged his supervisor, Holmes, and myself as we entered, though he did not rise but continued to sit at the desk before him, which had upon it a telegraph. "Signals," said Lieutenant Richards. "This is Lieutenant McClellan. He is on duty for today. Show our guests what you have, Lieutenant. The Sûreté working in Rouen sent this about 1/4 of an hour ago." He passed to Holmes a lengthy cable of light blue sheets of paper. On them were white strips of ribbon, taped to the blue sheets. On these were black letters forming succinct sentences. "I know the man," said Lieutenant McClellan. "Captain Gerard Stoller. He's been duty chief in Rouen for years, before I began my service." Holmes was quiet for a long minute as he read to himself the telegram. Eventually he spoke out the substance of the communication. Jean-Paul Martin was assaulted in the outskirts of Rouen, presumably on his way to Le Havre. He was coshed on the head from behind. He is in hospital and is being looked after by some group of sisters of a holy order in Rouen. He will be all right. There was a fracture, but it was not serious. He will be in bed there for a few days." "This man would be the mate of Captain Drew Somrack," said Lieutenant Richards. "Yes," confirmed Holmes. Then Holmes said, "Our friend in the visitors' area. He had no cargo to manifest. I thought he had. Mr. Holmes, there is no manifest. We have been over things with Captain Somrack before you arrived, and to the best of his knowledge, the crates and boxes that were gathered up after the beaching of the Berwick match, his memory of what he had been taking across the channel. But none of this can be verified. We have signalled Le Havre for a confirmation of the manifest, should there are original documents there, but these are not often accurate. It is the shipboard manifest that matters." "Still, we are on it," said Lieutenant Richards, looking to McClellan. "Yes, sir, I am working on that. So far, no response." "Let me know if and when you receive word of this, Lieutenant," said Richards. McClellan nodded a response. "Mr. Holmes, why did you believe our guest had some cargo? He doesn't seem to have any, and has not asked about any. Somrack said there was a crate of some kind. Not a large one, but I think one that was nailed closed and not merely packaged. And a sack. You realise, Mr. Holmes, we cannot hold any statement made by Captain Somrack to be one of substance, let alone the level of surety to be evidence. Yes, naturally, it is for my own investigation that I act with the concept that indeed there was a cargo in the management and control of our guest. What is his name, by the way?" "He is Joseph Lorry of some part of London. He would not say exactly." "No," said Holmes. "I suppose he would not." The telegraph came to life. Lieutenant McClellan picked up a pencil and began writing down a few words. Whatever it was, there was pure economy of the use of language. "Well, not to speak out of turn, sir, but we're all going to appreciate the text of this communication. Whoever Lorry's been waiting for to send him instructions, that person did so just now, telling him to move on and to report to Cathedral tomorrow." "What in the deuce?" exclaimed Lieutenant Richards. "Not the way we appreciate our signals being used by civilians. But we could hardly leave this man in the lurch. Still, Cathedral, come now. A thriller in one of these two Bob spy pulps could do better by half." "I agree, much better. Unless his boss gave to Lorry a list of several words, each relating to a different form of action on the part of Lorry," asserted Holmes. "But that little matters," said I. "He is being sent packing and without any cargo. Am I correct? He has made no claim for any such." "None at all, Doctor. Aside from his precious camera, he has not made a claim for anything that has been of a loss to him." "Lieutenant Richards, I have something on my mind, and I was wondering whether you would postpone delivery of this telegram until we receive word what the blood sample taken from Captain Somrack has to show." "What is on your mind, Mr. Holmes?" asked Richards. "Or let me put it this way. Why would it be in the interest of the Navy should we play ball with you?" "Fairly reasoned," agreed Holmes. "Because I said to the lieutenants, something bad is going to happen should we give Lorry his way in this. That much is certain. His participation in whatever he is a part of is bad news. The worst. Holmes has his mind upon it, but not yet his finger. You must find a way to suspend time until he figures it out." Holmes looked up at me and smiled. Lieutenant Richards smiled, but ruefully. He was not fully on board with the plan of the postponement, but one could suspect the man understood there was something not right with the picture that had been materializing before him all morning and now into the afternoon. "Yes, Dr. Watson, you are correct in how you see the matter." Once more, the telegraph key alerted the lieutenant sitting at the communications desk of an incoming message. He responded with a signal to go ahead. He picked up his pad and made some notes. His expression became grave. He completed some routines and ended the transmission. "Sir," he said to his lieutenant, "that was the hospital. Captain Somrack has been examined and there was bruising found on the lower sides of his body, as if he were kicked several times. All in the room became silent. A sailor entered. "Sir, Danny's in the front." We left the communications room and marched to the forward section of the block of concrete that was the Navy's offices. "Do you have for me anything?" I asked the lad. The youth who was eager to serve earlier now was exerted and spent. Still, he held out his paper for me as though it was spun from silver. "Thank you, my boy," said I. Sherlock Holmes cut me off before I could share with him what the chemist had written on his letter to me. C2H3, C13O2, was all my friend said before I mentioned to him a single word. "Holmes," I nearly shouted. "But how?" "I eliminated the impossible," he said. His face was filled with worry. "There is more," said I. "The more will merely be other additives, and something I think to retard its efforts. So Captain Somrack was not sent off to a situation where all of the shocks Laurie gave to him would have been of no use." "The cunning devil," I said to Holmes. "You understand what I am suggesting, Lieutenant Richards. This Laurie poured a compound of chloral hydrate into Somrack's coffee just before the voyage. Then on the basis of your charge, Mr. Holmes, the man will get nowhere. We will not let him leave." Lieutenant Richards rang the bell at his desk. "Sir," a man entered. "Get me 2 of our police who are on duty. Then go immediately to the visitors area and keep an eye on Laurie. Joseph Laurie. Do not let him leave this facility. Get another 2 men stationed topside, where the station meets the general, civilian traffic. He gets bottled in, understand?" "Sir, you mean, of course, the man who has been in visitors area for the day?" "Of course, that's who I mean." "Sir, he's left." "What? How?" "I do not know how, sir. I only know he's gone. I saw he's no longer there. I passed by and was glad he had gone, in fact." "Lock down. Go." "Yes, sir," the man said loudly, and left. Lieutenant Richards rang his bell several times. No one reported to him, but we soon heard answering bells from 2 other locations. Whether the men believed this to be a drill or the real thing, they acted as if it were the latter. The perimeter of the installation had become surrounded by 4 men who began walking its edge. Holmes and I took up residence in the visitors' centre, which for so many hours had been the home of Joseph Laurie. Lieutenant Richards joined us some minutes later. "I fear, Mr. Holmes, that our bird has flown, and possibly off to this sanctuary, which was mentioned in his cable. And on top of this, I have something to report to you that will astound you. I do not believe this man, Laurie, was without a native intelligence. There is evidence that Laurie did the impossible, that he penetrated our communications room and was able to get at the telegram which had been held back from him. For it is gone, Mr. Holmes." As he said these words, Lieutenant Richards was shaking his head in disbelief. "That is certainly a setback," Holmes commented to the naval officer. "I don't think I fully appreciated his talents, Mr. Holmes. He projected such a brooding but ineffectual manner, as though without his superior, whomever that man may be, I believed Laurie to be incapable of independent action. I am, Captain, feeling wholly inadequate in this matter myself. I too have made a catastrophic blunder, and more so than you think you have. For Captain Somrack is my charge, and anything that touches him in a harmful way is my opposition. You have your work to do, and you have done it. I have failed in mine." We were left alone. Holmes had taken what had transpired especially hard upon himself. Captain Somrack gone for the rest of the day and overnight, and what could Holmes do? He could, he supposed, and he discussed it with me, go to where Captain Somrack was in his room at the hospital, and let him know we could prove he was not only duped by Laurie, but taken advantage of by being drugged. Chloral hydrate, not a kind drug when administered in the manner our good captain had it given him. I am, Watson, still guided by a publication on its use that is now some 2 decades old. The compound is a product of this century, but after its discovery, it was not until a lengthy paper of the late 60s was published that its properties as a sedative were enumerated in detail. It was an important work. That it is soluble in water, and therefore in coffee, made it ideal for the schemes of Laurie. But how was it used? Holmes gave me no response, so I waxed on about it from my own memories or wartime. We used it in hospital tents, and I know much of its benefits. It is a restricted potion. Its properties to make unconscious, its users make it a recorded pharmaceutical. It is on the list of required recording whenever it is dispersed, and it is not given to the general public but only used in medical situations. No one prescribes it to a patient to take at home. We are dealing with a fiend, Watson. What he has performed is beyond the pale of what serves for the typical criminal mind, and I am in fear of either of the two possible reasons behind why the assault upon Captain Somrack was done in the manner it was performed. Both choices hold with them the worst, for Laurie was either working for himself, and if that is the case, he is quite an evil fellow, or Laurie was following the instructions of a master who is himself both genius and devil, one who has the brain of an experimenter, and if that is the case, it all makes sense the action was horrible for that purpose in and of itself, aside from whatever gain was made by the crime. And the argument for Laurie's following the scheme of another is, these are deep and dark waters. This experimentation you have heard me mention, Somrack was not only used because he had transportation for Laurie, but also in a way for some culprit to play upon him, and not only bring to him harm, but also a terror, working to get into Laurie's mind. This is the worst business of all that can be thought of. Indeed, in the centre of this, there is probably this master, and how can I find him? Presumably, Laurie's a man who can be found by Scotland Yard. But this other, if he is the man I make him out to be, he will create in Laurie a fear and frustration of the mind, and Laurie will never turn him over to anyone this side of hell. Then shall we be off? I asked Holmes. Have you decided then to send word to Captain Somrack and let him know things should go well in his defence? No, Watson, I shall not do that. But I must send word to Lieutenant Richards that he make arrangements for Somrack to be guarded at his hospital room. Somrack remembered Laurie had a crate. He may repeat that to someone, and this time to someone who will believe him. Once the report is brought to light that his coffee was drugged and that we discovered this was the case, whomever sent Laurie on his mission will send another to deal with our friend Somrack. Holmes, how are you for certain? Because whoever it is pulling on Laurie's strings, that man is still very much in control, and Laurie dare not disappoint him. Whatever the message meant in its use of cathedral, it was certainly a warning that Laurie should not return to this man unless he brings with him what he conveyed from Paris. From Paris? By way of Rouen, naturally. I perhaps omitted that portion of the plan, said Holmes, looking out at the shipyard as the evening made the naked masts a black against grey. I've been too caught up with my thoughts to complete an entire plan for what will be my next action here at the base. Here at the base? I asked. You have done all that could be expected of you, regardless of how hard you've been on yourself. We will alert the Navy to safeguard Somrack. The naval station is back to its routine, and all has become quiet as a mill pond. Why should we stay? We are staying, Watson, because I must capture Laurie, and to do so, I will not notify the facility's personnel, nor the naval officers, nor the police in their patrols on the river. Should I do so, our quarry will probably run away for certain, and deal with his fear of this man who lords over him. Holmes, my tone became quieter. How can you say you are staying to capture Laurie? Laurie is gone. Laurie is where he has been for some time now. He is aboard the Berwick, below decks, and spying out the yard for an opportunity to recover his cargo. I need you to leave. Things are likely to become dangerous, and Laurie will not hesitate to bring harm to anyone who would get in his way. I need you to go to Scotland Yard and seek out one of our friends there. I have learned just how the Navy reacts to possible infiltration. They ring bells and alert both the good people and the bad, all at once. You're serious? Laurie is in one of the small cabins on the Berwick. Most certainly he is. There really was no other way for him to get at his cargo. What cargo? There is nothing there. We know this is so. What we know, Watson, is that there is a line running from the aft portion of the boat to under the waterline. What we know is this line is not cleated, though it is taut. I have tried it. Laurie's cargo is below the Berwick and has been hidden there since midway from Le Havre to Margate. Then, Holmes, I am naturally staying with you. Don't think you will send me on an errand to the Met or the Yard. That will not be so, I said to him. That is too poor a consideration. I was not happy with his suggestion for more than one reason, not the least of which he would want me gone from such a moment and facing such a man. Watson, this man is not likely to be someone to forget any man who would get into his way. You are married now, and you have a responsibility to your bride. This man is cruel, and I get the feeling that, although I cannot prove he has a hard and cunning master, he is, himself, an evil fellow, and probably on some level he enjoys the work he does. I sat in my chair beside Holmes and wondered about his fear my home life might be threatened by this fellow, or that my harm would bring a greater burden upon my wife. No, she would want I do this. Of that I was certain. I will leave just as you ask of me, said I, holding back from Holmes my decision to take a reserve position and observe the field of storm. Once I was on my way and above the top of the shipyard, looking down at where I knew my friend would go to. If Holmes was correct about Laurie using the barrack as a place to spy from, and one in which he could at the same time safeguard his hidden cargo, then from his vantage point I would have him witness my leaving the Navy's command and Lambeth Road altogether. I took heavy and tired footsteps, turned the corner from the naval building, and up and away from the ships I moved in an intentionally conspicuous manner. A moment later I was 2 full blocks from the river's edge. But I had already set my plan. I walked across the gardens at Lambeth until before me was the great structures that were St. Thomas's Hospital complex. I thought of Holmes's client and hoped he was passing a safe evening there, and used Royal Street to make my return at nearly the point where I had left. I was in time to see Holmes distance himself from the naval building and make his way to the silent docks where the barrack lay in the slip it was brought to after its impound. I nearly ran through the lawn of the handsome square of grass that ended at the first row of boats, just below from where I stood. Holmes had his back to me and was no more than 200 feet away. "Come out, Joe Laurie. It is only the 2 of us." He spoke down to the boat, the barrack. "And should you keep your voice as controlled as mine, we should not be disturbed by anyone else." Was there movement from inside the small steamboat? "I know what you did, Joe. I know your secrets, all of them. In a moment I can turn and walk up to Hercules Road, I should think, alerting my Navy friends along the way, and have you and your hidden cargo put out of business. Well then, Mr. Holmes, why don't you do that thing? Your guts are soft enough, and you can find yourself at your Wednesday night sewing circle when you get back to your cosy home tonight." From inside the barrack was the voice of Laurie, making his harsh and mean-spirited comments designed to project power, but in this case seeming more like a sour humour. Holmes gave the man too much credit. Now, there's the good and insipid Joseph Laurie the world has come to admire and enjoy. When the hall at Brighton has its next availability, we must get you booked in there for a good quarter hour. You know the routine. The warm-up man. Not the headliner, nor even the front curtain player, but the man who does the bits for, what was it you said the seamen at Isle of Dogs deserve? A farthing or 2. Yes, Joe, that man. I will thank you, Mr. Holmes, to give to me my prefix. I would say such is expected to be given all men as a rule, said Holmes. But when a man harms another with an electrical device as you have done, then perhaps prefixes and other similar courtesies go by the wayside. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Laurie? There was silence from the barrack. Yes, Laurie. I know of your tripod's ability. I know your camera hides a battery. I know you doped his drink and tossed his canteen into the water. I know you showed Captain Somrack photographs of the landmarks he would normally see on his channel crossing. A photograph, then a shock. A photograph, then a shock. Are you proud of yourself? What's in the water below the hull? What were you able to hide during mid-crossing when friend Somrack was between the treatments you gave to him? Come now, Mr. Laurie. You know I will have the Navy open up your important cargo, and we shall all have a good look at it. Fat lot of help any look of it will give to you. What, Laurie? No more poetry. No more clever comments about sewing circles and safety at home. Just come at me, Holmes. I am here. Come on board. Joseph Laurie was now visible on deck. He held something in each hand. The whites of his teeth were bared, and he snarled at Holmes. I walked carefully across the last stretch of grass, using 2 trees to guard my not being seen by Laurie, should his eyes have left Holmes, and he look my way. Yes, there you are, and with your pretty toys. Tell me, Joseph Laurie, Did you make them yourself, or were you given them and allowed time to practice with them? And in addressing your other various works, Jean-Paul Martin is in hospital. You leave in your wake a pretty list of achievements. You will have to answer for them before our justice. And where you do not answer, before our community, there is another justice beyond our world, before his judgment. I should think ours would be the better choice. Are you coming, or are you squawking? Some of us have social calls to make tonight. You believe you will hinder me? Laurie asked, leaving the barrack and walking onto the wood of the dock, advancing toward my friend. I am not Jean-Paul Martin. I am not Captain Drew Somrack. I will not turn my back on you, allowing you to cosh me or give to me a jolt. The jolts you gave to Somrack were in his cabin. Since you've been hiding out there, you have seen the portrait on the wall. He remembered seeing it, between his seeing your photographs, that is. You built up a nightmare for him. Who is behind it all? Who wears the top hat? What if you do not return to him? Keep walking, Holmes. Just as you please. Keep coming at me. There was a moment both men would not leave their eyes upon the other. I took advantage of this and walked from the edge of the grass to one of the Navy's smaller vessels. I hid behind it, planning my next move forward and to the flank of where Laurie stood. What's under the waterline? What's hugging the hull of the barrack? Why don't you dive in and find out? There's a good lad. We have for you a job or work to do, Holmes. An investigation. Take a dip into the water and join my cargo if you like. I'll help stage manage it. The two men closed their distance. I saw in Laurie's right hand his tripod. It included a thick piece of what I understood to be an insulated wire, and the case we had seen him with earlier in his left hand, though I now understood this to be a heavy battery used to charge the piece of tripod, which had to be a weapon of some kind that fed off of the battery and shocked an unsuspecting individual, bringing to them not merely harm, but in the state Captain Somrack had been put into, memory loss and misery. Who would create such a thing? Could Holmes be right in there being a higher power beyond Laurie, and one who wanted to learn about matters of pain and harm as much as he wanted some tangible gain? At this point, if you cannot see how lost your position has become, and that you can only manage your own destruction, then I have no safety net to offer you, Laurie. Holmes' words were now calm and clear. He had become matter of fact, and the passion his words had occasionally contained during the past minutes had subsided to the tone of a county jurist, fatherly and kind, though what kindness this man deserved was beyond me. Laurie advanced, and I saw his hands were covered with a blackness of some kind, what had to be insulating gloves or similar. These ran from his palms up to enclose all of his forearms. There was now only the distance of 50 feet of space between the two of them, yet both advanced toward the other. On either of their sides was the water of the docks. Behind Laurie was the barrack, and far from Holmes, on his right, was the walkway entrance to the naval facility. I could only presume water was Holmes's chief ally in his stratagem, and should he maneuver Laurie to fall over either side of the dock, his weapon would be rendered useless. At that moment, Laurie understood this on his own, and he looked to either side of where he stood. So you wish to put me into the drink, do you? One touch, and you will not only fail at that idea, but you will be on your knees, wondering what day of the week it is. And I can promise you nothing but a miserable Monday. When I put you into the water, Joseph, go and fetch from under the barrack whatever it is you have there. There's a good lad, said Holmes with a cool reticence. They closed to no more than 20 paces. Come at me, Holmes. I am no good to you where I stand. You cannot take me unless you join with me. Come at me, Holmes. But it was Laurie who began to advance while Holmes stood his ground. Holmes had moved slightly toward Laurie's left side, the battery side. If Holmes could place himself there and slam into the side of his adversary, he could topple the man in one hard push and all would end, or at the very least any danger to himself. Getting at Laurie might be a chore, but afterward, I supposed, Holmes reasoned Laurie could go nowhere in reality and he, Holmes, would be free to alert those who served as the Navy's police force, who would come out to a clatter of bells, place their eyes on the man in the water, and ensure he did not go beyond their immediate observation. I could see Holmes continue to take his flanking move to the left of Laurie. Laurie seemed unconcerned over the new position taken by Holmes. He continued to close the gap of space between them. Then I saw Laurie look down at his right hand. It was brief but definite. He walked another firm 5 steps, and before Holmes could run at him, and with 8 or 10 feet between he and Holmes, Laurie regarded his tripod, and a moment later what may have been one of the tripod's legs shot out from the rest of it, covering with speed the space between the two, and striking into the chest of Holmes. Holmes reacted to this, bending forward and looking down at where the spear had shot into him. Laurie took the moment to look at the apparatus in his right hand, and with a long and loose strung-out thick wire running from it to where Holmes stood, he made some motion, and soon Holmes was reacting in surprise and then agony. Holmes appeared to dance for a full second, and afterward collapsed to the wood of the dock as Laurie moved in on him. "Laurie, you devil!" I came at him. He looked up at me from what was now his crouched position, nearly beside where Holmes was doubled over in pain. "Hold there," he shouted. "Move at me and I'll give him another." I did not care an instant. I ran at him. He looked down to his device. I knew he had to make a choice, either to once more bring harm to my friend or prepare for my coming upon him. But if Captain Somrack could take in several of these shocks, so too could Sherlock Holmes. Laurie did not know what to do. It did seem he had chosen not to take his precious seconds to use his device once more on Holmes and make himself defenceless as I came onto him. He stood, preparing to fight me. I met him as he rose and slugged him in his face, and he fell upon the dock. "Navy, Navy!" I shouted at the now silent block of stone building above me, too far for anyone inside to hear me, I presumed. Yet I shouted anyway. Then one great collecting of my lungs. "Navy!" I shouted. I looked back to Laurie, who was on his knees shaking his head. I grabbed at the battery and using 2 hands, swept the heavy box, still crackling with its power, over the edge of the dock. The wire went with it, though not with enough momentum to successfully pull over the tripod. But I knew Holmes was safe, and that the device, its battery now submersed, was useless. Laurie took a moment on all fours to collect himself before he could attempt to stand. I did not allow him such a ploy and kicked at his chest. He screamed out at me. I saw him look to my legs and stepped back so he would not have an opportunity to trip me over the dock. I moved instead to stand between where he was and where my friend had been doing his best to recover from his shock of electrical current, and his wound from the spearhead of whatever bolt had been fired from Laurie's insidious device. I knew better than to turn and attempt to render assistance to Holmes, and that my best ploy would be to continue to work as blocker between them. There was a floodlight turned on from somewhere in the block building. It scanned the docks beginning far to its right, its beam moving slowly, taking its good time before shining upon our group of 3. There the light halted, and a half-minute afterward I heard the sound of men making their way toward us and on the double. Joseph Laurie lifted his body from the dock and made his way toward the direction from where I had come. I saw him reach the top before the Navy men got to the portion of the shipyard where Holmes and I remained. He was gone into the night, and there was nothing I could do about this. Holmes insisted he not be taken to St. Thomas's Hospital, but accepted a billet and for a while was placed in our client's room at the naval station. Into the room came Lieutenant Rees and a naval doctor, Commander Fields. Holmes was examined, and there it was we saw where the spearhead had penetrated his chest. "Notice," said the naval doctor, "how the tip is an arrowhead. It is designed to penetrate beyond any clothing and push under the skin. The human body is a marvellous conductor, and your friend took what we can only presume to be 8 volts at an amperage designed to have enough power to push the flow of current, but not enough to seriously harm another. Commander Fields," said Holmes to the man, "I promise you there was plenty of harm." And then he laughed as he leaned back in what served as his bed. "Lieutenant Rees," said a sailor from the entry to where we were assembled, "the medical room has been made ready. We have a bed prepared for the night, and there is plenty of food in the mess." "Thank you," Lieutenant Rees said to the man, before turning his attention to Holmes, who was being plastered by Commander Dr. Fields. "Holmes," Lieutenant Rees went on, "we have this man's plaything. We have put it aside, and tomorrow I will ask my command what to do with it. I already sent a signal to them that you would prefer to keep it." Lieutenant Reese and Holmes smiled to one another. "Holmes does not have in his lodgings, Captain, a black museum, though he probably would begin one if his landlady would allow for it." "Yes, Doctor," laughed Reese and then Holmes. Holmes's laughter caused him some pain. Commander Fields said, "Now there, Mr. Holmes, laughter is off of the list of allowed activities on your part for a while." "Yes, Holmes," said Lieutenant Reese. "Pretend you were shot with an electrical arrow. That should keep you quiet for a night." I looked up at Lieutenant Reese and then down at my friend, now prostrate on his back, accepting the administrations of Commander Fields. "You know, Holmes, I believe you have found in Lieutenant Reese here one of your kind, the both of you making merry over this assault. I think, Doctor," said Lieutenant Reese, "that it will take more than a buzz of current to bring down your friend here." "A buzz of current," said I. Holmes laughed once more, and Lieutenant Reese smiled again. "That's enough out of the both of you," said Commander Fields, bringing much-needed reason to the atmosphere. "I've got a patient here, and I don't want him to mar the work I've done on his dressing, heaving his chest up again and again, caused by either his experiencing pain or laughter." Lieutenant Reese seemed cowed by this final comment by the doctor. "I'll see you around 7 tomorrow morning," said Commander Fields, looking down upon Holmes. "I am relieved at 8, and before I leave, I'll introduce you to who will be your new naval doctor." "Doctor, will you be spending the night?" "I suppose not, as you have here a staff. I am late upon returning to my home, where my wife will continue to wonder over what has happened to me." "And, Doctor," said Lieutenant Reese, "I have arranged for Captain Somrack to be returned to us tomorrow after he breakfasts at the hospital, and the charges against him shall be lifted, though I still can only wonder at why in the beginning he was singled out by this Laurie." "I will return here, then, at 10:30, I told the naval officers. "Watson," said Holmes, "a word before you leave." Lieutenant Reese and Commander Fields looked to one another, then left us alone. "Watson, what on earth possessed you to lay in wait for Laurie to come at me? You were to go home." "Yes, I was to do a lot of things. I wasn't supposed to suggest earlier to Lieutenant Reese that Laurie was bad news from the beginning, but that I did, and Lieutenant Reese agreed. You were too caught up with the mystery relating to the voyage over from France that you did not see another angle to the way this man, Laurie, functioned. He was an evil. He would never leave you to walk away, not under any circumstance. You thought he would report to this ghostly mastermind somewhere in London immediately, and at all costs. He wanted your blood. That was as clear to me as the moon. You placed his fear of this other as paramount to his thoughts. You so badly wanted this toy of his. Why so? What for? It's just a thing of evil, another invention to bring madness and misery to others. Well, you got to experience it firsthand. Thank you, Watson. Thank you for your staying power and fortitude. I believe you may have saved me more than you know. I believe if it were not for you, I would have gotten more from Laurie's device, and by that I mean more so than Captain Somrack. And afterward I would not have been conscious as he pushed me into the waters of the dock, floating about until the next morning when these Navy people would have found me. There we agree with one another, I said to Holmes. There is more to speak of, but that will have to wait until later on. Until then, you must not talk about whatever it is that is hidden under the barrack. We can get to it after Captain Somrack is given permission to take his steamer from the Navy's dock. Get yourself to your home now. I will be fine here. I dare say you will be, said I, standing to leave. You may even get a sedative out of this, and more hours of sleep than I'll enjoy this night. Possibly so, said Holmes, who fell back on the poor bunk, wherein I presumed he would begin his rest. The next morning found Sherlock Holmes in the best of moods. There was, as I expected, no ill effect from his electrocution, as from a scientific view, once he became released from the grip of the active shock, his body fully recovered. The worst of his circumstance had ended, and he had rebounded. Together, along with Lieutenant Reese, on duty once more, and Captain Somrack, now back at the station, The four of us examined the recovered electrical spear and the wire that had been attached to it. "This is an amazing device," said Holmes. "Photographs and this thing," said Somrack. "I wouldn't have believed it if my eyes weren't upon it." "I do not believe its spring-loaded effect was ever used on you, Captain Somrack. I have an idea that aspect of its capabilities was made as an afterthought. It was used on you while Laurie held it in gloved hands. You were unaware of it as a device as it was administered to you along your sides, and because you were too busy coming in and out of your drugged state. And yes, photographs placed before you of the important landmarks that define your nightly crossing of the Channel. But why so, Mr. Holmes? So much trouble, and for what purpose? There may have been a half-dozen ways to do what was done, and none of them having to do with my being used the way I was by this man I never knew about, nor never harmed, and Jean-Paul battered, and my good name and reputation brought into a bad light." "There's more to it at its heart, Captain Somrack," said Holmes. "There is somewhere buried beneath it all a horrible cunning of the worst design. I wonder whether you were specifically singled out from the start, or whether after some days, looking at what was available to Joseph Laurie and his boss, you were chosen from a list of possible men who piloted a late-night boat of your class." "Well, Mr. Holmes, there are certainly others. But are there others who do business with Paris and in the same section of the city where your regular clients may be found? I shall have my chance to look into the French side of this." Holmes was released later that day and given the electrical device to take with him. We were told Captain Somrack would be given full leave and his boat later that afternoon. Holmes took a moment to speak with the man privately. There had been agreement between them, and they shook hands, and we parted. "Black Museum, Watson, you can have your moments," he said, leaning back in the luxury of an open carriage, allowing himself the benefit of a full coach as we travelled back to Baker Street. The following day we were visited by Captain Somrack, who had come to Baker Street without fanfare or any other member of the company that employed him. "The true owners of the Berwick. I am off now to cross the Channel, tie up at our dock at Le Havre, and then go to visit poor Jean-Paul. He will still be off of work for another week." We enjoyed some wine together, while the captain thanked and congratulated Holmes once again. "And here is your prize, Mr. Holmes, and just as you asked, I did not open it beyond what had been placed around it as protection from the water. A plant material of some kind, I think. That plant material is what protected the crate from any water leakage into it while under your craft. It was probably the contents of this sack Laurie carried with him when he boarded. The material is from a section of cultivations made possible by Henry Wickham. Not someone in your line, Captain. An explorer criminal of unique stature. You should save the material itself, as you will rarely find the like of it in traffic, but give it another decade or two, and there will be much of it about, you shall see. And you are therefore paid in full, Mr. Holmes." "This you have given me shall certainly do that," he said. Captain Drew Somrack left us with a light heart and a good feeling. After we enjoyed a smoke by ourselves, Holmes said I should come back in a few days, and he would discuss with me a conclusion to the matter of Captain Somrack's adventure. When I finally took the time to see him again, a full week afterward, he was before his chemicals. "And here it is, Watson," said Holmes, pointing to a small container on his chemical table of white powder. "It is white powder," said I. "Yes," said Holmes, "that is exactly what it is." "But a white powder of what?" I asked. "No," said Holmes, nearly laughing. "It is white powder." I was beside myself in my friend's seeming attempt to make merry with me at my expense. It was an annoying feature of his character, but in this case it also demonstrated he had fully recovered from his assault. "You are your old self once more, toying with those who care about you, instead of telling them in a straightforward manner what it is you are about. I suppose I should take your electrical stick from you and threaten you with it. Then, afterward, I would be your best chum. Just so, Watson. You have discovered how to play me, certainly." I shook my head. "Well then, enjoy your game a while longer. It is called ballastite, and the general term for it is indeed white powder. It was stolen from the chemist Alfred Nobel, who has been working in Paris to perfect it, and just did so not more than a few weeks ago. It is similar to black powder and is used as the basis for firing projectiles toward an enemy. It is an improvement upon the black, and many have been working to achieve something like this. Nobel is a Swedish engineer who has temporarily moved to Paris, where, as I said, he has just achieved his goal. And now I have it. Its main component is nitroglycerin, but there are 2 other chemicals used in its makeup, and now I know them. Joe Laurie stole this from Nobel's laboratory in Paris, as he had been planning to do for some time. Nobel's lab is on the same street as are these companies, which manufacture some of the electrical fixtures for which Captain Somrack's company provides transport across the Channel and onto London, through Margate. Laurie knew a good deal about Somrack before the night of the theft. He made it so that his mate would not be on board for the crossing. Then he went to Le Havre with his powder stolen from Alfred Nobel. He boarded the ship and loaded the man's coffee with chloral hydrate, and afterward toyed with Captain Somrack by giving him his nightmare crossing of the Channel. But there I am stumped, Watson. There is where all reason leaves this adventure, and all madness takes control. This device, this method for obscuring what happened on the voyage, and the secret hiding of the chemical from a possible customs matter. Fine. Let us say Laurie worried about this and wanted to hide the white ballastite. The place he chose is not a new one, but try it he did. I suppose the plan was to take the stuff off of the Berwick at Margate, but the Navy was too fast for Laurie, and the steamer was put back into the river with the powder still below the hull, and away they all sailed for London. You were the last thing this man expected, showing up to the naval station, and then the 2 of us walking up to him as though we were there to make him a problem. I commented. Watson, that part of it was very queer. Laurie could not resist his jibes toward us. What a wretched being. He is filled with hatred and cruelty. From where did he spring? Who would employ such a man? Are you on again about your mastermind puppeteer? In fact, I am, he said. What shall you do about this white powder secret you now possess? I asked him. Nothing for a while. I am beginning to form in my mind that there is, at the centre of all of this business, a power whose interests go far beyond this one episode in which we were able to participate. It is as though there is a brain somewhere in London, spinning a web for its own purposes. Since we parted a week ago, I have learned that an unidentified man, more of my puppeteer supposition, used his oblique connection with the Reform Club to have a faceless meeting with one of its members connected with government. This did not come to me easily, and I used the connection we formed recently with the Earl of Derby to get to the meat of this. This one-sided and faceless meeting was an offer of service for the chemical compound of this very powder, produced by Nobel for the presumed benefit of the French government, and should the French have contracted with Nobel, this stuff might have been used against our country. So a well-placed secret source claiming to be able to procure this compound for our benefit as our adversary was about to purchase it from Nobel. All right, just as you say, said I. Then how the cards have turned. Though Nobel had left his native land and had gone to France to conceive this for the French government, and principally their navy, the French turn him down after its completion. No. Just so, Watson, you in your occasional publications could not write a thicker plot device, and as a cherry to top this dessert, guess who Nobel ends up selling it to? I cannot imagine, but I suppose the answer will lead to more of this madcap. I nearly laughed. Exactly, you have it in one, the Italian Navy. Pshaw. By that I mean the French, their chief rival in the Mediterranean. You're right, of course. If I were to send an outline of this to Strand magazine as a suggested adventure of yours. Holmes began to laugh. They'd tell you you had lost all of your faculties. The both of us burst out with continued laughter. Secret drugging of coffee, nightmare making, steamships running aground, hidden puppet masters. I began, but then Holmes finished. Evil men firing electrical arrows at me, hidden cargoes, French and Italian rivalry. Isn't this all so beautiful? Exclaimed Holmes. A thriller in one of these 2 are Bob Spy pulps. We both stopped our thoughts for a moment, but then we burst out in an uncontrollable laughter. Mrs. Hudson entered, and witnessing our enjoyment, she reproached my friend. There are people out there in the real world with real problems and real needs. And you go about playing with your chemicals and get telegraph boys running up and down my steps 16 times an afternoon. Last week, it's some boat's captain, and the month before last, the Bank of England, and I don't know what to think about any of it. The two of us looked at one another once more, and we began to laugh all over again as the landlady stood before us, shaking her head.